to See or Not to See. I'm Luke.
And I'm Madi.
And today we're going to be speaking about a video that's been released by the Tej and Root Foundation, which highlights childhood blindness and extreme poverty.
Yeah, it's quite a tough watch because you see firsthand, these children living with cataracts, not really being able to navigate themselves around their house. And obviously the parents find it really, really tough. As Luke said, it's, about poverty as well. And the parents can't really help their children as much as they'd want to. And I think that's a really horrible thing for any parent to go through.
The video is about a family of 6 with 3 out of the 4 children suffering with cataract blindness. The 2 young girls each suffer quite badly with cataracts and are nearly completely blind. With the youngest being just a baby, it's quite emotional to watch. It's quite difficult to watch because you can't sort of imagine what it must feel like to be their parents or to even be them or their older sibling.
Yeah, the video touches on the eldest sibling, Lalit. It takes a big toll on him because he has to spend quite a lot of time looking after his younger siblings. I think taking the 2 younger girls to school, almost being the guide because they can't see. And given the fact that they live in a very rural area, it's not an easy walk to get to school. I don't think they actually specify how far it is, but you do see in the video some tricky terrain, and sadly one of the girls falls over, which is, like we said, it's just hard to watch, really.
Once you see the children reach their school, you get to see a clip of the 2 girls sitting in their classroom, not really being able to join in, not really learning anything. And that's when you get to meet one of their teachers who talks about how they struggle and
they can't really engage with class, can they? Because, the education isn't really helping them because they can't be taught like non-visually impaired students. They can't read the papers in front of them. And the teachers, I guess, given it's an underfunded place as it is, they don't really have the facilities or means to give extra care to these a group of already suffering children in kind of every way.
I think one of the hardest parts to watch was when the teacher described the young girl's future as a dark future. I think that kind of hit harder than when the parents would obviously emotionally talk about how hard they believe that their children's life is going to be, but to see it from almost an outsider looking in and having them know that
this kind of like a future really isn't that bright for these kids unless they do get help, unless they have, their sight treated. And obviously it's not as simple as that. I mean, it would be an ideal world if everyone could have access to everything the whole time. But sadly, it's just not the way it works. And the teacher said, that they probably will have to drop out if it carries on like this, or go to a specialist school, which I don't think is feasible for the parents to afford. It doesn't seem like it anyway.
No, I mean, they mentioned that they were living on, what was it, $300 a year?
Yeah, that's
which is obviously very small. They don't really live close to any sort of resources, any sorts of places where they could even begin to try and get a different job or anything like that. And then the whole case comes up of how are they supposed to go out and get a job when they need to take care of their 3 blind children.
It's just, it's so hard. I mean, the mum repeatedly says, we have so many problems, like we're too poor to do anything. I think at one point she even says that the villagers discriminate against them, maybe for their socioeconomic situation, or maybe because there's a stigma around giving birth to 3 blind children. I mean, it is a heartbreaking video, especially in the first half before they are met by a group from the Tej and Root Foundation who do have, specialist funds for caring with children with blindness. I'm not too sure how many other charities in that area really have a specialist focus on that. But I think there's something like 200,000 cases of childhood cataracts around the world. And obviously we're seeing three of that. So it's a very prevalent problem. And it's good that TKRF is focusing on children in this case, because it's clearly a prevalent problem.
Just going back to what other people would say about the family and about the children, the mother also mentioned that people had told her to register the children as blind so they could receive some form of state benefits.
Almost like, just give up, like register them as blind, isn't it? That's the kind of what she was told.
This kind of made me think, like, is the system broken in this country and other countries? Is it easier for these children to remain blind and the parents receive some sort of benefit? Or is it better in the long term to have healthy vision, be poor, struggle, and then in the future maybe you could be more economically productive, be happier, healthier? But it just seems, for the time being, I can understand why people would give up and simply just receive the money, register the children as blind. It's a quick fix, and sometimes that's what's needed.
It is sometimes what's needed, but it also does speak to, and this was mentioned in the video, like the possible issues of, childhood cataracts in this case, I guess in many cases, but there's an inaccessibility to healthcare. There's obviously the extreme poverty, but then there's also just a lack of awareness. The parents didn't know that the children were blind for a while, so they clearly don't really know what cataracts looks like. And then I guess the neighbors or the villagers don't really know that there is treatment to be had. So they didn't know that, so they just told them to accept their poor fate and move on with it. So I think that, it really does, there needs to be more intervention in this whole problem, because people just don't realize that it's reversible.
I think the video does a pretty good job of highlighting that as well.
Yeah.
It shows that even though there are people that live in these ultra isolated communities and people who have little to no access to healthcare, to hospitals, to anything like that, I think it shows that this family isn't just one family. This family is so many people from so many different areas, countries all across the world. And I think organizations like this, releasing these sorts of videos and bringing awareness and just showing people that this is happening. It might not be on our doorstep, but it's happening in a lot of places much more frequently than the things that we probably see day to day. So the video opens up with some key facts about childhood cataracts and blindness in children. I
think it would probably be quite beneficial to run through some of those, because before we watched this we really didn't know that much about it, and to summarize it up for any listeners, I think that would be quite a good thing.
Yeah, so there are approximately 200,000 children that suffer with blindness due to cataracts all across the world. And if it's left untreated, it can ultimately lead to permanent blindness.
I think there was a part of the video where one of the doctors said the eldest of the children suffering with cataracts, she had suffered with it for 8 years. So her sight is treated, but it's never going to be 100% anymore.
No.
And I think that's, really highlights the importance of early intervention and recognition of these kind of problems.
And I think that, again, just shows such a stark difference between nations such as Nepal compared to more Western countries. I think the fact that we have the education, we have the knowledge of what a cataract would maybe not necessarily a cataract, but we'd know if there was something wrong with our sight or a loved one's sight.
Yeah.
And the fact that there are so many different things that can be done to prevent cataracts, that can be done to treat it. The surgery that happens here is almost like a last resort. I know personally that I have relatives that suffer from cataracts, but they go to the hospital once every other month and have an injection which almost keeps it at bay. I mean, I don't know if that's 100% the process that happens, but I just know they have an injection and that prevents their cataracts from worsening or appearing at all. So I think the fact that the first thing that these children have had to have done is immediate surgery just shows how quickly and how bad it can get.
Yeah, it's quite telling, isn't it? Another interesting fact is that, you know, it's always interesting to know the causes of something like this. And from what I can see, typically it's a genetic fault inherited from the parents that cause the lens to develop abnormally. It could also be Down syndrome, or it could actually be infections picked up by the mother during pregnancy, which could really affect the children's sight. So I guess that could be why the mother was so conscious of what the villagers thought about her birthing 3 blind children. I guess there was a massive stigma about her health during pregnancy.
The video takes place in the Jharkhand district in Nepal. It's one of the 77 districts of Nepal, and it's also one of the most isolated and remote areas in the country. I believe that around 50% of the population of the districts lives below the extreme poverty line.
Crazy. I mean, that's if the population is something like 190,000 right now. That's a considerable chunk of people living in situations just like this video, just like the family in this video. I don't really have all that much to say about the video. I think we kind of run through everything, but what I would say is that I think anyone listening should definitely watch the video. Like we said a few times, it's not an easy watch, but it's definitely an interesting and important watch. And I think it's an important thing to watch and read about, you know, other people in other places around the world. I think it builds a level of understanding and compassion and empathy that is lacking a little bit today.
You've been listening to See or Not to See, a podcast brought to you by the Tej Cody and Ruat Foundation.
I've been Maddie.
And I've been Luke.
And thank you for listening.